Today we are talking about point-slope form. So this is the third form of a line. Let's just recap the ones we've already talked about. So remember, we had the first one was called Slope-Intercept Form. And that is the y equals mx plus b. So that's the first form that we learned. You know that m is the slope, b is the y-intercept. Then we moved on from slope-intercept to what is called standard form. And that is ax plus by equals c, where a, b, and c are integers. So no decimals, no fractions. You don't know what the slope is just by looking at this one, but you could find it by doing negative a over b. You can always take standard form and rewrite it into slope-intercept if you wanted. And this is the one that we could graph using x and y intercepts, right? This one, if I'm going to graph it, I'm going to start at b, the y-intercept, and then follow the slope. So that's old news. These are the two that we've already talked about. That's what was on your quiz yesterday. So now we have one more form. I told you it might just be my favorite. Yes, point-slope form. So do not get intimidated when you see the formula. It looks kind of crazy at first, but then once you understand what the parts are, it's actually pretty simple. All right, so point-slope form, this one's called. Does anybody know it by chance? All right, here it is. Y minus y1 equals m, and then in parentheses, x minus x1. What? What in the world? Yeah, it's awfully similar. There are some similar pieces to that slope formula. Speaking of slope, well, there's a familiar thing. M. M is slope just like it was in y equals mx plus b. So that's good to know. So that if I have an equation, I can just look at it and tell you what the slope is. If it's in this form, I can look right there. Whatever is in front of that set of parentheses, I know is the slope. Okay, so that's nice. Because remember with this one, you had to do some work to figure out the slope. You didn't just know it by looking. Here, I do. I can just look right there and just tell you my slope is 7 or 1/2 or whatever it is. All right, so that's cool. So let's just jot down that thing is the slope. And then there is the only thing that's new in this one that didn't appear up in these ones are these x1 and y1 business. So remember, that little tiny 1 on the side, it's just telling you which point you're using, right? Just like Pablo said, we saw that in the slope formula. You had x2 and x1 and y2 and y1, and it just tells you I'm either dealing with the first point or the second point. So these are just ones. So I'm only going to be dealing with one point here. I don't have a second point that I have to worry about. So what is x1 and y1? It is literally, this is why I love this one. x1 comma y1 is any point on the line. So that means in the next chapter, we're going to be writing equations of lines. So if all I have is one point and the slope, I can write the equation of a line just by popping it into this formula. It's actually pretty convenient. I can also graph using that. If I don't have to start at the y-intercept anymore. I can start at whatever point I'm given and then just follow the slope. I also don't have to have the x and y intercepts. like I did up here. I can just take this and find just one point and then follow the slope. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, so let's try this. I think it's actually helpful if I give you a point and a slope and then we try plugging it into this formula to see what it's going to look like. Okay, so this we're going to do more in the next chapter, but let's just jot this down. Write the equation of a line through the point, let's say, how about 3, 4, with a slope of, oh, I don't know, 2. So again, we're going to do this more in the next chapter, but it's, right now we're actually kind of I'm going to be giving you equations that are already filled in, and then you have to take the information back out. But I think it's helpful if you see how they go in to begin with, so it kind of makes sense. So here's just a point on my line. That's x1 and y1. And then that is my slope, so of course that goes in for m. So if I wanted to write this equation, I'm just going to take my formula right here. I'll just recopy it here. Y minus y1, m times x minus x1. And now watch what I'm going to do. I'm just going to fill in those 3 numbers. I'm going to fill in x1, y1, and m. So watch how this works. Y minus, what's y1?
3.
Ooh, 4, right?
Oh, 4.
You want y1 there, yeah. So 4 equals, what's m? 2. And then x minus, what's x1? 3. Ta-da! That's it. You just wrote your first equation of a line. Look at you go. But now, so what we're going to be practicing is I'm going to give you this, and I'm going to ask you to kind of work backwards and give me, look at this, and tell me a point that this line must go through and the slope. Okay, so obviously you know the answers here, but let's look at, no, I don't want to do that yet. Let me give you an example. So, I don't know, let's do this. Given y minus 7 equals 1/3 times x minus 1. Find a point and the slope. All right, so new line. I'm giving you some random line. I want you to find these 2 things. The slope is probably the easiest. If you're looking at this equation, what must the slope be? 1/3, right? That's in the m spot, so the slope is just 1/3. Well, that was pretty easy. Okay, got the slope. Now, I have to figure out the point. So, kind of look at what we did above, right? So remember how we took 3, 4 and we popped it in, and it landed here and here.
-1, -7.
Good guess, but look here. Remember, see how this was +3 and +4? And look at how it looked here. So the point, if I have x minus 1 here, what must I have plugged in? Dylan?
It would be 1 and 7.
Yes, it's +1 and +7. Because of the formula. Look at the formula. See how the formula has minuses? That's the one thing that is a little bit confusing about this, because it's actually the opposite of the sign that you see there is the point. Right? Because if I took 1 and 7 and I plugged them back in this formula, wouldn't it look like a -1 and a -7? Yeah. So, what if the points were negative? Well, let's try it the other way. Let's try it back like we did up here. So,
Wouldn't the negative points just be negative positive?
Right, they're going to turn to positive. So let's try it like I did up here. So let's say we went through the point. Let's pick a negative one now. So how about, I don't know, -5. Let's do one that's negative, one that's positive. -5, 6, with a slope of, doesn't even really matter, how about 2/5. So if I'm going to plug that into the formula, y minus y1, what's y1 here? 6 equals m, what's m? 2/5 times x minus x1. So it's going to be minus -5, right? Minus -5. That's how it turns into a plus. Y minus 6 equals 2/5 x plus 5. So if I'm trying to work backwards, right? So now pretend I didn't know any of this stuff up here. Oops. Pretend I didn't know that. I just had this equation. What's the slope? 2/5, and then the point that it must be going through has got to be -5, comma 6. So it's really the opposite of what you see there. So I know that'll take a few tries to get used to, but that's kind of how it works. All right, so let's look at the worksheet that you have. And let's see if we can kind of, let's do number 1 together. So this very first one. Okay, let's start with the slope because that's nice and easy. Slope is 2. Got it. What is the point that goes with this? Yes, it's really the opposite of what you see here, comma, the opposite of what you see here. So 1, 1. Now, how do we graph this? Well, I'm going to start at the point and then I'll just follow that slope. So let's go ahead and put a dot at 1, 1. So that would be right there, right? And then from that point, I just go up 2/1. And there's my graph. Try the second one. See if you can come up with the point and the slope. Don't graph it yet, though. Just find the point and the slope, and then we'll talk about it. Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You too. Okay. Slope. Start there. The easy one. 1/2. Does everybody agree? Everybody got 1/2? Now, what is the point that matches up with this? What'd you say? I agree with you. Remember, you want the x first, so that's going to be this guy, and then the y. So, does everybody have those two correct now? So, let's go ahead and plot 3, 2. Make sure you're doing that correctly. Some of you are getting mixed up, by the way. So 3, 2 means you go 3 to the right and up 2. Not any other kind of way. You always go your x first, and that's left to right, and then the y tells you up or down. So now from that point, I'm going to follow my slope. So a slope of 1/2 tells me to go which way? Over. To the right, always to the right. Good. Up 1 to the right 2. And then I can connect my dots. Sorry, look more like that. There we go. That looks better. Jump down to number 8. So here's 8. Go ahead and find the point in the slope. Don't say it yet. Just write it, and don't grab it yet. Just get the point in the slope, and let's just make sure that we all match. Everybody's got a value for each? Okay, start with the easy one. Slope is 1/2. Everybody's cool with that? Got that? Okay, great. And then the point in this case has got to be woo, -3, -2. Right? The only way that these can be pluses is if the point were negatives. So it's always the opposite of that and the opposite of that. -3, -2. So now when we go to graph, where am I supposed to go to plot -3, -2? Left 3, and then down 2 because it's negative, right? So your first dot should be right there. -3, -2. And now I have a slope of 1/2, so I'm going to go, yes, up 1 to the right 2. And I can do that a couple times if I feel like it, which I do today. Look at all those pretty dots. Connect them. Bingo, bango. All right. Let's just do one more, maybe that has one of a, oh, you know what we should do? I actually want to do 2 more of them with you. 11. So look at 11 on the back. What is your slope?
We don't have one.
It's 1. Guys, listen. If the slope were 0, there'd have to be a 0 there, and then 0 times anything, and the whole thing would just be 0. So you wouldn't even, there would, it's not, it can't be 0. Because 0 is a number, and 0 times something gets you 0, so all this would get wiped out. It's not 0. It is 1. There's a magic 1 there that we never write. So the slope in this case is a 1. What's the point? Ha! Isn't that a question of everything? What is the point? You're right. You get what I'm saying? Like, what's the point? What is the point? The point is -2, -2. So now go ahead and try and graph that. Start your graph at -2, -2. And then give me that slope of +1, which means you're really going, yes, up 1 to the right 1. So -2, -2 should have started you right there. And then we will follow that slope. Okay, last one I'm going to do with you for now. 15. Take a second, figure out the point in the slope. Pablo, what's the slope? Aha, -1, right? There's just a negative sign in front here, but that really just represents a -1. So my slope is a -1, and the point is 2, -3. Does everybody get that? I'll take your silence as a yes, you did. So plot it. 2, -3 should be a dot right there. And then follow that slope of -1, which means to go where? Down 1 to the right 1. Okay, great. So let's stop this video here.